Welcome back. Episode 9. Yeah, so I think the first thing we wanted to do, actually, we were talking offline about feedback and how we need some. So we've got to set up a couple of things. One is an email address and one is the Reddit or subreddit.
Yeah.
So we'll put it in the show notes, but the email address, if you want to send us any feedback, hopefully not, don't be too mean, but if it it has to be, then it has to be, I guess. But we'll hug each other whilst we read it.
Just crying.
So the email address will be jasandrich@wildtruetalk.fm. That'll be in the show notes. And the subreddit is Wild True Talk. So yeah, any feedback that you have, good or bad, please send it our way.
Or just to let us know you exist. Also fine.
Yeah.
Maybe what country you're from, maybe.
Yeah. Podcast analytics are still terrible. So we don't really know who's listening.
Yeah. Or how much, or if they're just downloading it and then not listening, it's possible to know. So yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be good to know. So we were thinking that we're going to do this episode, one more episode, and then that'll be our first season sort of done. And then we'll sort of have a think about life and whether we want to keep doing it and how we're going to keep doing it and whether we're going to change anything. So, any feedback for that would be great.
Cool.
Okay. So the last episode was on contracting versus permanent, and we don't think we have any feedback.
Absolutely smashed it.
Yeah, it's just perfect.
It's put to bed.
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. So that was easy. That'll keep this episode about half the length.
The only thing there's always a but. The only thing I did think is maybe we didn't make a strong enough case for perm. That was the thing I was thinking. I feel it came across quite pro-contracting.
Well, I think that was because permanent's the de facto, right? So everyone sort of, that's where you go by default. So we're saying, try this other thing.
Have a look at this. Yeah.
And I mean, I've forgotten how positive perhaps I was, but I mean, I've only ever had permanent jobs. So it's interesting if we felt that did come across still quite positive.
Maybe it's time for a career change.
Yeah, maybe that's a sign. But yeah.
Maybe it's also a factor of the type of people we are, where we're both quite technical. We're quite techie. Like we don't necessarily wear sandals all the time. When we do, only with socks. But we maybe that's part of it, because if you were a more people-y person, career builder type, who's perhaps a little bit less techie, then perhaps contracting
isn't for you.
Because it's more of a gun for hire. I can do this thing, like this skill, really well.
Yeah.
So maybe we lean that way because of that. But yeah. Or maybe just because.
But I haven't leaned that way yet.
No. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah. Or maybe it's because of where we are. I feel like if we were in Silicon Valley, contracting might be slightly less appealing.
Yeah.
Just because they have companies that do interesting things. And unless you happen to be a developer who also happens to love finance, London's a little bit sparse on the ground for companies that you think, oh, that would be cool. Whereas America has a lot of companies. And it's also just bigger, I suppose. But there are more things. So I think maybe I would be less likely to be contracted there. But yeah, no, I didn't. I thought we just nailed it.
Yeah. Pro contracting. Okay, cool. Well, then we'll move on.
Quickest feedback ever.
You haven't skipped too far on the podcast. This is just where the podcast is now starting.
Someone's going to be skipping 30 minutes in and they're going to be like, what, they're halfway through?
So today we thought we'd talk about management, the management side of software development, I guess.
Yeah.
And from both sides, we both have had experience managing and have been managed by definition.
Yeah.
So we thought we'd talk about it a bit. Might be quite interesting.
Could be.
Fortunately, somebody has made some notes.
That'd be me.
Yeah. So we've actually got some
preparation.
Some good starters for 10.
Surprise.
So I think we were speaking about it before, but I think the summary of it was, as someone who has to have a manager, if you're just a normal employee, software developer, the quality of your manager can make a big difference to how much you enjoy your job.
Yeah.
I think that's really the key.
That's how I think. What I was saying that is totally how I feel, and what I've experienced and seen other people go through is that you have a rubbish job but a pretty good manager. That job will probably be okay. You have a pretty good job but your manager's a bit rubbish, then that will probably be a disaster. And they seem to be of happiness and how well a job goes for you. They seem to make up maybe I was saying somewhere between 30 and 70%, because if they're an arsehole, then
Yeah.
you're in trouble basically. So from that perspective, they're quite important. And then also, if you are maybe thinking about managing, I don't know so you've managed. Well, remind me. What have you? Good friend. What management have you done? Not for a little while, but before.
I guess. So I've managed one graduate in a big organisation.
Oh yeah.
And then in my startup where I was CTO, I had a team of three guys that I was looking after. And then in the current place, I've looked after a couple of guys in Mumbai, so like remote off-site developers. But
I didn't know that.
no, well, that was for a while, and then one of them left. Nothing to do with me, I hope. And the other was more of a C++ guy, just helping out with KDB. But once I was there, he then moved back to C++, so I ended up I didn't need to manage him anymore. So that was quite nice. So I've done it in a bigger place, and I've done it in the startup where I felt like I wasn't doing a good enough job as being a manager because I had to spend so much time developing. And that's, one of the things that I think is an interesting problem as a manager is how do you split your time up? Assuming you're not just a full-time manager, but a people manager, you have to do something else. It's then like weighing up that time, and that's something I think we should discuss.
Yeah. So I've only managed people in a company which was like my company, and I started with one person and went to 4 over the course of a couple of years. And I felt very much the same as you, where it was one of the more difficult things I have attempted to do in my career. It's quite...
Yeah, it's a similar situation, right? Because you were still actively developing as well. Right?
Yeah.
So that's actually very similar, that situation.
Yeah, at least reviewing a lot of code.
And everyone was being junior that was under you as well.
Yeah. And in my case, they were really junior because we taught them all to program from scratch, which is probably the most junior you can be in some respects in this field. So that was challenging. But
yeah. So how would you say, like... my feeling always when at that startup, as we both got a similar experience there, was I feel like I should give these guys more of my time to look after them personally in a professional environment, but I just don't have that time. So therefore, I consistently felt bad about not spending any time with them, but then also just didn't have the time to even spend with them.
What one thing has to suffer, and you get to choose which one, basically.
Yeah,
like either you're coding and the stuff you should be doing, or the team, because you're not spending enough time. And I think because programming is a focus, I don't know what you call it, like you need to be in the zone, and you need to do it well.
Yeah.
You need to have big continuous blocks of time to do it if you really want to be at the most productive you can be. You want to spend like 2 hours at a time doing stuff. But then if you've got 3 people working for you, they can ask questions, they need things from you legitimately.
Yeah.
And so it breaks that up. So you end up getting interrupted a lot more, context switching a lot more. And I think it's really common to see senior software developers who then someone says, oh, you can start managing people. And then you watch them in the slow descent of going off the rails as they get they're sort of straddling, trying to basically do 2 jobs, and one of which they're probably not that great at because it's a new thing for them. So it's just like doubly difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough.
And that does seem to be, in a lot of bigger organisations, that tends to be sort of the reward of staying and doing a good job, is that you end up moving out of it.
Yeah.
Moving out of development into being a manager, which is weird.
It's like, come do this job, get really good at it. Oh, you're really good at it. Okay, help other people do it now, which requires a skill set, which is, I don't know in a Venn diagram how much they overlap, but not a lot.
Not a lot at all. Like maybe 80% of it is just not what you'll
you were
still
doing
be
before.
using Jira.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, now you're creating the tickets rather than reading them, and trying not to shoot yourself. But like code wise, and some managers end up not coding at all, like quite commonly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's one of the reasons to get out of those bigger organisations, because it feels like they don't know what to do with software developers or any specialty like that.
Yeah, some companies are better than others, but the more senior you got them, even if you were not a people manager, you sort of ended up with more responsibility. There are exceptions to that rule. I used to work with a guy I was thinking about when I was thinking about what to say today, and he was quite a technical person, so he was like a TA or he was in charge of all the tech for where I worked, and he didn't want to progress up the natural ladder that the big company I worked for at the time had, and they just couldn't. They were like, "What? What do you mean you don't want to get promoted?" And he was like, No, I quite like doing what I'm doing now, thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe just pay me a bit more money. And they kind of did not compute with them because they were like, you need to start managing people, or you need to, do other things that aren't that. And they don't necessarily accept just like that person being really technical and being really good at what they do. There is probably a limit to how far your career can go doing that. Like no one earns, well, in terms of money, not everything's money, but no one, earns like £10 million a year because they're like really good at coding this particular thing. It's super rare. Whereas like if you're a CEO, then sure you might make 10 million a year because you like progressed up the natural sort of management train.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he was just kind of fine with it. But yeah, smaller companies, it's a bit better maybe.
Yeah, I think, yours was your own company and mine was a startup, and it was there was nobody else to do that. So it had to be me.
Yes.
But, I wasn't like you said as well, neither of us were experts at it. So it's definitely a new skill, and it's good to learn something that isn't necessarily a software engineering problem, but is another sort of requirement, job that you do within an organization. And it was good to learn that and do it and learn the difficulties about it, because it's difficult in a whole different way. Right?
Yeah, it's really hard.
And it gave me a new respect for I haven't really had any bad managers myself, but I can appreciate it more now that it is quite hard. And it probably means that if the people underneath that manager feel like he's a bad manager, it's because I think that balance perhaps isn't right for that manager. That's how I think of it now. I was like, if my guys were a lot more moany about, or were complaining a lot about the team or something, or me, then it would be because I'm probably not giving them enough time. But I felt like that wasn't the case. So maybe the split was just about okay. But I could have spent more time with them if I had it.
That particular job will be very difficult because startups are normally resource constrained, so they probably needed you to do a bunch of dev and like also look after, like make sure that they're all productive, and it's like just ends up in an impossible situation. Whereas in a bigger company, maybe things would be a bit more reasonable.
But the thing I never really worked out, and this is perhaps you would have had this more. In my team, it was quite easy because each individual person had a separate set of skills.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, we have a website issue. Well, that goes to person A because he's the website guy. Java guy, okay, he's junior, but we'll give it to him and I'll help him out. Person B. KDB side, okay, he's more junior again than me, but it's a KDB problem. He's the only person other than me that knows it, so I'll chuck it his way.
The work just assigns itself.
But I was always thinking, like, in a bigger team, you'd be like, okay, we have 5 of these resources to do Java. Apart from just, I mean, obviously you can just do it based on load and be like, well, he's not 100% allocated.
Yeah.
But if you're a good manager, you should be thinking, well, this is a particular problem. Which of these guys is best tackled to deal with it?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you also have to take into account the seniority of them. So if you're like, well, all of these problems that I have, if I give it to senior developer A, he's going to do all of these in half the time as B, C, and D. But I can't let B, C, and D sit there not doing anything, right?
Yeah, that's
that sort of thing. Like I never really understood that, and I've never had to be in that situation. But I imagine that's tricky, where you're having to give jobs to people, tasks to people that you know it's going to take them longer, but you have to give them work.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Have you had that problem where you could do something or the person can do it, and then you're like, maybe I could do this quicker, and it would just be less hassle?
Yes, I had that a lot.
Yeah, that's a really hard, because
it's really hard. Yeah,
your engineering brain's like, well, I could just do it.
Yeah,
and then you're like, but what's the point of having people?
Yeah,
working, because at some point it's not true. Like if you hired 30 competent developers, you could not do the work of 30 competent developers. But the problem is when you have 1, 2, or 3, you're like, maybe I could just do. And you also fall into that trap of thinking, oh, it doesn't sound like it will take that long. But actually it will. And when someone comes back, you're thinking, gosh, I feel like I could have done that in not very long. But actually when it's you and you're doing it, you're like, oh yeah, there's this thing and I've got to connect the combobulator to the disk, whatever. Yeah. It is hard to not be a control freak.
I had that issue particularly with the Java stuff because I had written all of the Java stuff from scratch. I knew
You're familiar with it.
I knew more or less straight away how this would be done.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, I picked all the libraries that we're using, Jetty, the stuff that, all the sort of standard libraries. So I was like, this is, giving him the task, I knew what the solution was almost.
Yeah.
And how long it would take me, to a point that maybe in anything else like the website stuff I wouldn't know.
Yeah, maybe that's easier in a way.
Yeah, but then it was like, well, he's going to go away and do that. And then you go through the cycle of, well, it's not the way I would have done it. And then you have to fight that battle of, well, how much does he need to change it to be the way I would do it versus it's acceptable.
Yeah.
And that's a separate side of, that's more of a code review seniority thing. Problem.
That's hard.
But that's really hard as well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you could easily get into that situation where you just give him enough feedback that he would just write exactly the lines as you wanted to write them, but you've just made somebody else, like a secretary.
Type it out, type it again, you didn't type it right.
Yeah. And it's like fighting that instinct is difficult as well.
I think that's really hard. And I definitely, because my staff was so junior, I normally just made them change it because there's a benefit for them. As long as they understand why they're changing it, there's a benefit
That's
for
important,
them.
yeah.
If I'm right, which I may or may not be, then there's a benefit for them being like, I would have done it like this and that would have been better because of this and that. And actually, when they were changing things, I think it's like a learning exercise for them.
As long as, like I said, the key point there, though, is as long as they understand
Why,
and you're not just doing it to be pedantic.
Yeah. And I'm sure sometimes I maybe was being pedantic. So it's like, because I am very much a stickler for everything. So I'm sure people have had to sit there and they feel like, they're just typing out the code again for my, because I'm just a bit mad with certain things to do with code. So yeah, we solved a lot of that with standardizing the way that we do things in the team.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stretch to everything.
Yeah. I had some difficult problems with one of the people that worked for me in the past. I appreciated every time that I gave him something that I would have to spend some time with him explaining the problem and how best to solve it.
Yeah.
And so I accepted that, and that was like, look, that's something I have to do because otherwise he's never going to learn.
Mm.
But the frustration coming back is that then he'd still struggle and there'd still be problems in his code that I felt like it wasn't the first time we spoke about this, and that feeling that, without trying to be unreasonable, that he just wasn't learning those key things repetitive, over 3 or 4 goes of either the same problem or 3 or 4 different tasks.
Similar things.
I felt like it makes it quite hard then it makes that feeling of, I'll just do it a lot easier, because in my head I'm like, these are some small tasks that need to be done that I'm probably not going to get round to doing because they're not that important, or they're just minor enough that I'm not going to worry about them. Now I'll give all these to this guy, and then they come back, and you're like, that's somehow worse than if we hadn't done it, or you know what I mean? That sort of feeling.
I know exactly what you mean.
It's really hard to.
The thing is, it's weird in my mind. A line of code not written is not as bad as a badly written line of code. So if someone writes some code and you're not happy with it, I have the same mentality. I'm like, I'd actually rather that this wasn't just in the code base, at all. It's weird. But,
it's really difficult.
But it's kind of true, because bad code like that, it can breed bad code.
Yeah, because people start seeing it and it sticks out, and then people are like, why did that get? Yeah. Do I need to make less? I can put less effort in now because it's. I'm
working on a code base now that, again, without getting too personal, that a couple of people that worked for me and someone that didn't work for me worked on, and I'm going back and taking ownership of it. And I code reviewed all the code, so ultimately the buck stops with me in the first place.
Yeah.
But I keep finding things that it's actually in pretty good shape. If I came onto this code base, it's pretty much, especially because I code reviewed it. I think that really helps. But I found a few things where something's gone wrong in one place, and then someone's like, I need to do another one of those. So they've copied the file, and then it's not duplicated code, but there's something wrong in that code, and then it's wrong everywhere else. So
without copy and pasting, I don't understand.
So the one for me is in some of the code we're doing, there's a function, and somebody, when we started, had used the function keyword in JavaScript, which as a rule, me and my team just don't use.
Right.
But then everybody that started that same type of file had just copied and pasted it, and then they've used the wrong syntax, and that wrong syntax had then just spread.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And this code base has maybe 30 files of this type. And the other day I just had to go through all 30 being delete that, change it to this, delete that, change it to this. And it's just someone had just literally done it once
just like without even thinking
and then
about
it spread like a virus where like and I was doing it too. I'd be like, I need to start another one, and you just glance at it, you're like, that looks right, copy paste, and then it's everywhere. And you're like, oh no,
That's weird.
What's happened? It's like, yeah, it's strange. So you gotta keep a really tight ship, because otherwise these things can spread. But yeah, it is hard.
That's hard. So then we had a different guy that was really strong, and I knew whatever I threw at him, he would just get the job done.
Yeah.
And it was, I'd perhaps seen those kind of people before from a non-management point of view, just sort of as my peer, and now having them next to each other as people that I'm looking after, the difference then was, the sort of pride of him, getting it back to me and being like, wow, you've done a really good job, versus this where I'm like, this is going to be a lot of work.
Yeah,
that sort of high and low. It was really stark, and haven't seen that since, actually, mainly because I haven't been managing as many people, but that was the standout thing for me, that I was like, wow, this is a big difference and a big thing to deal with as a manager.
Training people and code reviewing them and helping them get better at their craft we've talked about it a bit before, I can't remember which episode, but like it's a
time sink.
It's a time sink, and it's something that's like rewarding and really good for that person, but and it's kind of rewarding for you, but the benefits are very asymmetric.
Yes.
Like they benefit a lot, and you benefit by getting a slight warm fuzzy feeling in your stomach.
And then longer term, better code, hopefully.
Yeah, but that's if they stick around, because these sorts of things take. I think 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said this was not true, and like I've trained a lot of people to code from scratch and help them get. I think like it pushed them along quite a long way in terms of ability, and I do sit back and think, well, that's pretty cool. And now they have jobs doing other stuff, and it's kind of weird. Every day they wake up and they go to work and they do a load of coding, and a lot of what I taught them presumably goes into that, and it's just happening, and they're like earning money doing it, and it's like, that's cool. But on the other hand, I'm like, it's a real, like, I can't explain it. It's a slog is the word I'd use. Like every day, when people are new to coding, like they can't help it. Like they don't know what they're doing yet, and you have to help them learn. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But I can see where the 10x programmer thing comes from, talking about this, because the difference, like you just said, the difference between someone that really knows what they're doing, that maybe has got, say, 3 to 5 years experience plus, versus someone that's still on the learning curve, the difference is vast. And then compared to someone who's 3 to 5 years plus and is like what they call a rock star, someone who's like really good, like a Jas, just very
kind.
But like someone really great, like the amount of work they can get done is like, I've worked with a couple of guys like that in the past, and their managers just like love them.
Yeah,
like, just give it to Jeff. He'll just beast it out.
I guess from a manager point of view as well, those rock star or better developers, even if they're not got that much experience, that just get the job done, are easy to manage, and thus, I guess it's that thing where because they don't hassle you that much or don't take up too much of your time, you think they're great. I wonder whether that. I don't think I felt like that, but I wonder whether more generally people feel like that. And then there's that risk of that good person feeling like the manager never gives them any time.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, I want to talk to them and he's never there, or he's never got time for me.
Yeah.
And actually because they trust you enough to get on with it.
Yeah.
But it comes across badly in the sense that they're like, well, what, do they not care that they want to chat to me?
Spending time with people, managers spending time with people that work for them is quite important.
Very important, yeah.
It's very, like, for basically that reason. Like everybody, like if you work for someone and you're like putting the effort in for them, you want to speak to them and be like, how's it going? Do you like the work I'm doing? And even if like you're doing really good and the work's going really well, you still kind of, well, in myself, I know that I want that attention. And if I'm doing a really good job and then I get ignored because of that, it's irritating.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like you're not causing them any problems, so they're like, we'll skip the catch up this week. I think that's
a really common thing, right?
Yeah, because they're like, everything is a-okay, and then so they skip it, but then you're like, and it's just a human thing. It's the same as being like I'm sure it's like the same as being like a football coach or something.
Yeah.
Like you just need to give all your players attention because they're all sort of prima donnas. It's kind of the same thing with coaching.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think it really is. It's easy to get into that. Having been the manager side, I can easily see that it's like, oh, well, we don't need to bother about catching up. But then on the other side, feeling the frustration of that not happening.
But on the flips, like on the side of the manager, a catch up is like an hour. If you have 3 people working for you and you do weekly catch ups, that's 3 out of 40 hours a week just gone.
Yeah.
Like we have a friend and he was telling us the other day, I don't know if you were listening, but he was saying that he has like a team of people he has to catch with. He just has like a half day where he's like, it's just catch up. So
really?
It's like, yeah, just like a tenth of his week.
Yeah,
it's just,
I didn't hear that.
It's just like catch ups, and it's like, yeah, they're not, I'm sure as a manager, catch ups, they're more rewarding again for the people working for them.
Yeah.
What would be interesting, because I don't have experience managing a team of people that are like really like high-end developers, if you know what I mean. I think that would be maybe a different experience. I don't know what that would be like. If you just, like, I have some friends that I feel like if I was like running a team, like people I know from like university and stuff that are really good coders, if I was running a team and some of those people were working for me and I was like, I'll just give it to like Dave and he's just going to come back and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And the code review is just going to sail by because, you know, then maybe that would be a really different experience and you'd feel like empowered because you're like, all these people are doing all this work and we're like,
yeah.
A lot of the time it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
It kind of feels, it's very, yeah, one of the core things about it for me is that, like, I think I take enjoyment out of doing a thing and being like, I did that and it's done. And management, logically, you are getting that. 3-5 people work for you. They do a bunch of work. Their work is kind of your work.
It's more indirect, isn't it? For sure.
It's indirect, but like, you helped achieve that with them.
Yeah.
And there's 5 of them. So if you say 50% of it is like you or 30%, there's still 5 of them. So like 30% times 5 is more than 100%. So you've done more than if you sat there and coded it.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't feel as visceral to me, the enjoyment I get back from it. And that was one of the reasons that I was like, I'm not sure if this is something that I want to do, like long term.
Yeah.
Or how much of it I want to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a change in mindset. It's giving up the ownership of actually writing the lines of code, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's having that feeling of that you've achieved something without necessarily touching the keyboard to achieve the thing, but because you've been there sort of orchestrating, that counts. And it's difficult, I think, as somebody who sits there actually implementing to then step away or do less and be like, oh, I'm now just orchestrating to have that same reward. I think
logically it makes sense. Like the person that runs like Google is sort of transitively getting a lot of stuff done, but like on a human level.
But they should be doing other things that also help. I suppose that's the point, isn't it? So like, I mean, to be fair, I was actually just looking at your doc again, and you got a list here of what makes a good manager. I just had a quick look at it whilst you were talking then, and I'm thinking, if the manager's doing these things, then they are being useful.
What's the first thing on that list?
Shielding from crap, which is actually a really important thing, though.
A crap shield.
Yeah, it's like it come back to your point you said earlier, which is context switching and getting interrupted is really disruptive to a developer's productivity. So if you've got 5 or 6 clients that everyone's working for, you don't want each client necessarily going to each individual person whenever they've got a random question.
Yeah.
You might be like, well, I'll tell you what, I will take that on as the manager. They'll come through me. Mm-hmm. And if I think it's not a ridiculous question, I'll come to you and ask you.
Yeah.
And just by providing that layer in between, that person, the manager, can just bounce stuff off that's rubbish.
Or delaying the question.
Yeah, delaying it.
Making things asynchronous so that people... Because asynchronous communication for developers, so when people message you, like maybe they send you a Slack or an email and you can respond in your own time. Whereas if they walk up to you, it's synchronous. You've got to answer them there. Unless you're...
Well, things like Slack sort of try and enforce synchronous communication, which is why I think it can be a bad thing.
Yeah.
But, you could just be like, he could just be like, I'll batch up all of the questions and catch up or stand up the next day. We'll just do it then. And it's like every question takes at least 24 hours to respond.
In bigger organisations, there are, like, if you look at it as in a slightly mercenary way, there are resources or employees that are doing stuff, and you get a lot of competition where people are like, we just want that guy to do this thing for us, and they're like trying to sort of sneak a bit of their time because they need a thing doing, but it's not really the thing they're supposed to be doing. But there's, a good manager will sort of stop that kind of thing where it's appropriate. Sometimes it can be good.
Yeah.
Could be good for the company, but a lot of companies are really siloed, and then it's like shielding like that and sort of taking care and letting you know what you should be working on. Can be good, can be bad, can stop you from getting exposure.
Yeah.
Can keep you sort of in a back cupboard somewhere, and they're like, this is really great work. And it's like, yeah, Worker B7 did it kind of thing. So like...
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. I think in a functional team, it's definitely a pro. But in a more dysfunctional team, where perhaps stuff is getting directed to a certain person because they always get the interesting stuff, and you never see it because you're not involved in those conversations, yeah, for sure, that could be a problem.
I think a good manager will probably promote you as well, actually. Like, in a bigger organisation, they'll be, like, telling their boss, you know, Dave did a really great job on that bit. Like, you know, he or she is someone that we really want to keep. But the thing is, as someone that works for someone, you don't really know whether that's happening or not unless they tell you. Or some managers I've seen will CC people on emails and be like, look at this great thing that we released today thanks to like Jas's hard work. And they'll have the boss in and then you'll be CC'd. So they're like, look, I'm doing this for you. I think
and it's also a really, as somebody that needs to get feedback, if you're in that sort of promotion thing, it's the business people, the client being happy with what they get. And then also being able to give you feedback that way as well. I think that's very powerful.
It's kind of, it's weird. It's like you want to be isolated, but not so much that you just can't see the impact of the work you're doing. And you want to see that you kind of want controlled exposure at certain times. That they're like, we're going to go and walk over to like the people you built this for, and they're going to, you know, we're going to give them a quick demo and show them. But on the other hand, not let them pester you when you're halfway through.
That definitely is a risk, isn't it?
It's hard, but good manager will definitely do that.
So what else we got on this list? So the second one is requirements setting.
Yeah,
which we've already nailed in a previous episode.
We've covered episode 7.
7.
But I'm realizing as well as we're talking, managers in software. A lot of the things we're talking about with managers will be true for someone who works in UX or design. Some of this stuff like shielding, like the example you just gave is a UX example, not a coding example. But I kind of realised with a lot of software things, the manager ends up also sort of assuming project manager and requirements and stakeholder management, which is why this job is
hard
because it's like you kind of need to be a bit technical so you understand what the hell's going on. But you also need to do this other very multidisciplinary thing, which is going to involve you basically communicating with people, so lots of meetings, being on the phone.
Those two things a lot.
Yeah, like almost all the time. And at the end, it's.
I think the more meetings that your manager is in, the better it is for you guys. Because it probably means he's going instead of somebody from the team. Yeah,
my first boss is, I think, probably the most stereotypical manager I've had in that sense, where we worked in quite a big organisation. He would spend all days in meetings so that we didn't have to. Yeah. And he was a developer before, and he didn't develop anymore, but he was very good. He understood what we needed, and would set the requirements, would translate things from the business.
Yeah,
he's still there actually, and he was really very good at the time, I was like, well, you're not doing any proper work. But in retrospect, having worked in different things, I'm like...
Yeah, as a junior, you think that would be what you would think, though, right? Because you're like, well, you're not doing any dev.
I think the thing that is difficult with managers in a lot of big companies, what I just described, someone can fake that and do it in a non-productive way.
Yes.
And then that's like their job. And they're just middle management. And then that's where these companies end up with...
Lots of inefficiency. Lots of bloat in that middle...
In that middle tier where it's like, what are all these people doing? Because... Actually,
you've got more managers than developers, say.
Yeah,
for example,
or an equal number is quite common, like 1-to-1, and you're like, there are 5 of us writing the code and 5 of you managing us.
Yeah,
what are like 4 of you doing?
Yeah, definitely. My first place, big investment bank, that really suffered with that problem of a lot of people doing not a lot. It felt like.
What ratio do you think is about right for like that?
Yeah. I was thinking that in my head, and I didn't have a good number. I was going to say 50%, but.
So one manager, 2 developers.
Yeah, but I think that would be great. I think for the people being managed, because you'd feel like you'd have a one-on-one connection. That I think pragmatically no organisation's ever going to have that. But maybe 1 manager to 4. I think that really is the sweet spot. I think after 4, I think you felt this before. I think did you get a 5th person on, and it suddenly got really hard.
Got a 4th, and
it was. It was a big jump up.
It was a big jump in just that little bit of extra time I had just to not manage. It just became management as well. And then all of a sudden it was the only thing I was doing was just code reviews, helping people solve issues. I think it depends. I think that ratio is going to depend on seniority and how competent. I'm sure I'm sure I could manage like 10 Google engineers, like I'm sure they'll be fine.
I wonder if you'd have a different set of problems.
I get them all, solving whiteboard problems all day.
Like, can you just do this with a pen and paper?
Yeah. What I need is a generic algorithm to sort a binary tree. Who could help me? All the hands go up. Just be there.
I'm there in the corner going, just do dot sort. That's built in, right?
It would be fine.
I think if you've got a situation where there's one person managing, in quotes, although you can't see my air quotes, like 10 people, they're obviously not actively managing those 10 people because there isn't enough time to do that, right?
Yeah.
I would say.
There are like other structures of companies with management. So something I read, I do not come armed with links, but there is a Harvard Business Review thing that I read, which I'm going to have to now find.
Yeah, you're going to have to find that.
I'm pretty sure I read it. Could be true, which is that people whose managers can do the job that they're doing. So like if you like couldn't come to work anymore, your manager could sub in for you and do your job pretty effectively. Maybe not quite as well as you do it, but they could do it. Those people are way more happy than people that have managers, like way more happy in their jobs than people that have managers that just couldn't do their job at all because they're just a manager.
Right.
So like you're coding like KDB stuff, your manager could also do a bit of KDB, has a history in KDB. You'd be happier than someone who was like a project manager.
Yes.
With a non-technical background.
Yeah.
Because when you say the combobulator doesn't connect to the whatever, they're like, I understand, I've been there. Like, oh, they can even completely understand what you mean, let alone even empathise with you.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it a lot in people that are non-technical that manage where they can't tell the difference between someone pulling the wool over their eyes and a legitimate problem. So they get really suspicious. You come to them with like a legit problem and they're like, well, how did we not know about this last week? Whereas if you were talking to someone else, they'd be like, oh gosh, that's come out of nowhere. Like,
that's a really good point.
We never could have predicted that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think that's super true. And it's particularly true for programming because it's so abstract.
Yeah.
And some jobs, which are a bit more generic, if someone's job that's less specialist, even if you're not that specialist, you could probably do their job anyway. So then you can manage them even if you've never done that job before.
Yeah.
So like...
I wonder, not to offend any infrastructure people, but if I was thinking that with infrastructure on a tech side, right? Like it feels... You can reason about infrastructure problems a lot easier to somebody who doesn't really know that much about infrastructure because you're talking about things that people are aware of, right? Like computers, servers, screens, that kind of stuff.
I reckon...
I don't know. Maybe it's a bad example.
We could do that, but I think if I asked my mum, I think she'd
to manage people who are looking after infrastructure.
Yeah, because she might not appreciate those things, but more people will appreciate this. Coding is particularly abstract.
Yeah. I guess anything with IT or tech is there's some level of prior knowledge.
Yeah, and it's quite big for a lot of it, actually.
You got to be careful now because you're going to insult some industry if you come up with an example. Because you're like, anyone could do that.
We could just pick an industry that like just programmers don't like, and then it's pretty safe. But I don't know what that industry is. Maybe project managers. I don't know.
Let's move it on. Move it on.
But it's having people that understand what you're doing.
That's a good point. That's actually thinking about it. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Of the people I've thought were my best managers and the people who knew the most about the technology specifically. Yeah.
I think there's so the traditional management structure as well for tech, like software people, is you have a manager who maybe doesn't write much code and just manages a team of developers. But I think there's another structure which is becoming more prevalent and in my opinion seems a bit more effective, which is that you have quite senior developers who still develop and do a little bit of management, but maybe they don't really have like a load of reports or something.
So more like a mentor for the team, or
maybe like buddying up, and I think in some ways,
and then you can have more of just a people manager alongside them. Is that?
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to think of examples, but I don't know. I guess companies like Google, they do have managers. Yeah. And they also hire quite senior developers.
Yeah.
So like their most junior developer at Google is probably not. I mean, I'm sure they probably hire grads and stuff, but realistically, they hire pretty good talent. So I kind of feel that is more effective in some ways.
I could definitely agree with that.
My personal gut feeling is that, so like when we were running my company before, didn't want to hire like some dedicated project manager person, because I actually think that there's just so much room for inefficiency and confusion. And if everybody's technical and everybody's doing useful work, it just feels like a better situation to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like always keep management as lean as possible, because it's, I don't know. Ideally, what you do is you hire people that can adapt and have those skills, but also that code. So like they're good at coding, but
distribute all of those things that you would expect a good manager to do across a set of people who are also developers.
Who are developing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably the problem is with that is that there's a limited supply of developers, and then there's a very limited supply of developers that can also do those things.
And also want to.
Yeah. And that makes it very hard. But I think that probably is the most effective way to run an organization. Maybe
spread the load of management to a bunch of people,
because then they're directly responsible for like the thing they're working on, but they're maybe communicating with the stakeholder for it. And you see it across lots of different organizations where that happens, and it tends to work pretty well because they then have a lot of autonomy over their work, because they're basically in charge of it, and they're not just saying to their boss, "It's late, I'm sorry." They're also the boss, so they're like, "Oh, I need to get that done."
That makes sense.
So
the next one in the list is being a good human, which I think is a fair requirement.
Quintessential.
Yeah. I haven't come across... I've been fortunate that I've not come across a lot of people that I would actually classify as a bad human.
I thought you were going to say the inverse. I haven't had a manager that's been a good human. I haven't come across many.
No, I was trying to think what I would even... I've not come across many people at all in my career that I would actively say are a bad person. Would you...
I mean, when I say good human, I mean, there hopefully aren't that many bad humans. I mean, take responsibility for their staff and treat them like as if they were their own. I don't know how to say that, but they look
a manager who treats everybody as if they weren't being managed by that person.
Yeah, so they like genuinely look out for them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like you kind of feel that they've got your back. I think that's something in a manager that I would really want.
Yeah, it's like it's the trust I get. It's trust, isn't it?
Yeah. So like, if you're up for promotion, you're like, that person's going to put in a good word and do everything they can.
So if you said your manager like, look, we're going to put you up for promotion, you feel like that manager's going to push for you to get it, then that's a good person, right? Whereas somebody who's like resentful that you've asked for it or something means you're like, I don't really trust that he's actually going to do the right thing.
I think, not to be too corny with it, but I think like being nice to people and building trust with them is basically free. So like, and I think it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference to the way human beings are wired. If you like the person and you're like, this person is behaving in my best interests, then they'll do better work for you and work harder. And so, and also I've worked in a few scenarios where I didn't feel that was the case, or
you felt like somebody wasn't looking out for you.
The one that gets me more is people that like they'll manage me, but they're not super competent. That's the worst. But yeah, I think
no, I think that's a good one. I mean, it sort of leads into the other one here that you've got as well, which is protect and stand up for the team.
Yep,
it's a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if the team has a bad release and it causes some big problems, you want a manager that's going to stand up for for us, the team, and be like, look, we screwed up, but we need to do better and take some of the flack from the business. And the person who's actually messed up the release doesn't need to get an earful from the business, right? Like some places that will happen, but it's a lot nicer for the team if you know that the manager's taking that earful for you guys.
The buck ultimately stops with the manager if they're responsible for other people, and I think a manager that like owns it and commits to it.
Yeah.
It's leadership. It's leading.
Yeah.
It is. I heard, I don't know if I told you this already, but I heard DHH, who's the guy that did Ruby on Rails. They have a podcast now, and he was saying that when you screw something up at work and you need to like communicate with stakeholders, he was like, rather than, you just basically need to commit to your mistake and go with the worst case, like, oh my God, we really messed up. And like say to people, we're really sorry, but that was like a 3-hour outage and it's a complete disaster. And we're, maybe not overdo it, but just completely pretend like it's the end of the world in the way that you communicate it with them. Because then people say, oh, it's just a software for a few hours, it's fine. Whereas if you say, we were down for 3 hours, but it's not that, it wasn't that bad. It was just a 3-hour outage. People say, I really needed it in that 3 hours. And what the hell are you guys doing?
Right.
And he was basically saying, if you have a mistake, just like commit to it, own it completely, and just think how badly could this have affected someone, or how much could it annoy them, and assume that's how everybody feels about it in the communication. Then people tend to be like, dude, it's just a piece of project management software. Like, who cares? Like, it's a few hours, and that people respect it. But I think again, that's a kind of leadership.
Yeah.
But it's a good little...
That's true. I think it's important to, and part of that is taking the praise and the issues as a team, right? And not just, sending some, junior kid up to be like, yeah, you screwed up, off you go to talk to the guys that are really annoyed with the 3-hour outage, which is horrendous. But I've definitely seen other teams around, particularly when I was in my big place, where that happened more, where you'd expect a call from the, MD or whatever that you'd offended or screwed over. And that's just terrible. Like, it's not there's no team culture there, right? And it also then means that the individual team members themselves then won't look out for each other. Yeah. If you're all there as one unit, if one guy screws up, the other guys are going to be like, look, don't worry, we'll help you out, that kind of stuff. But if it's that sort of, each person is worried that they're going to be the one that gets called up to get a bollocking, each person's going to feel like they're going to a lot more sort of look after themselves, right, and not look out for other people. So the culture of the team can be so different in those situations.
Yeah, I think in general, sense of team is good and important, and I think
the leadership of the manager, the leadership from the manager helps set a lot of that.
Yeah, if you're in the same as if you have a good manager in a crappy job. If you're in a crappy company with a good team, then basically it's as if you're in a good company for a lot.
Because you don't interact a lot with people outside of your team.
If the core people you interact with are awesome, and the vice versa is true, you could work for a great company in a rubbish team. You don't get on with half the people in it, and your manager's rubbish.
Yeah,
it's going to be a disaster, even if the company's like the best run company on the face of the earth.
Yeah. What's
next? Clear signals for good and bad behaviour. Well, I was thinking you just bring a dog clicker to work. So when someone does something good, you just let them know appropriately.
Oh, I see.
Or give them an M&M or something like
Catch.
that. But I think, no, seriously, I think good managers do that. If someone does something that they don't like, they'll let them know. And if they do something they do like, then they... Whereas if you say nothing, then people... We were talking of an instance earlier on where I think the manager
needs to give a clear signal.
Yeah, needs to give a clear signature to the person and the team about something that's happening that's probably like suboptimal for the team. Yeah. Just on a business level, it's not even like a it's like with code reviews are the same. If someone's doing something in code reviews consistently you don't like, but you're not letting them know, then they're not going to improve. So you just need to say,
they can't possibly know, right? So
everybody should get everybody gets one chance for free, and then you tell them the thing, and then hopefully they take it on board and don't do it anymore, or massively reduce their rate of doing it. But probably 2. I think it depends on the person. I've had a lot of people work for me where it actually takes 2 or 3 times, and it's not that they're stupid or they're not taking it on board. It just seems to take 2 or 3 times, but I think it varies on the person.
Yeah.
I noticed that consistently over all 4 people that work for me. I have not yet had anyone work for me that I would tell them something once and I'd be like, I'm never going to see that happen again. It depends what it is.
Yeah.
But I've actually noticed sometimes this is with code, not like behaviour or anything.
Yeah.
But hopefully behaviour, if you hire good people, is not the end of you don't have those sorts of things. But I think nipping it in the bud and just being really clear on how because when people work for a manager, you're working for a company, but really it feels like you're working for that person.
Yeah.
So your job is to basically make them happy. So if they indicate to you what to do, should have quite a strong incentive.
And just on that when we're talking about sort of dealing with bad behaviour in the team, as a manager, the most difficult things are the difficult conversations.
Yeah.
When things are going well and everybody's ticking along nicely, management can seem quite easy. It's when you get to these situations where, and this is then where you see where a good manager will take on those issues and try and fix them, right? So, somebody is taking advantage of working from home and everybody's moaning about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good example where a manager needs to step in and to speak to that guy or woman and be like, look, you can't be doing this anymore. And similarly, the most difficult thing as a manager is, if you have to actually let somebody go.
Yeah.
Fire them or make them redundant, whichever. Those are difficult situations, and I think, some people are, as a bad manager, will avoid those discussions. I've got a great example from the current place, which we might have to cut out, but I'll tell you anyway. So there was a guy that worked in our company, and he decided to relocate to Paris just because he wanted to. He was French and had French family, but he was working in the London office.
Right.
We don't have any.
Surprise! I'm in France now.
So he was like, I'm moving to France. Mm-hmm. But he didn't resign.
He just went.
Which,
and then said, "What? Like I'm working from here now."
Yeah.
Do they have an office there? No, just from home.
No, just remotely or whatever. Basically, he felt like he didn't have enough to do as a sales guy. He didn't have enough to do, so he was like, "I'm just going to move to where I need my family to be."
Wait, he was a sales guy.
Yeah.
Does this mean he talks to people in person?
On the phone a lot, I guess. But I think that the summation of the story was that he was a sales guy that felt like he didn't need to do any sales because we weren't selling anything. He decided to move to France for his family, but the boss, he was so bad at this sort of stuff, he didn't fire him.
They didn't fire him?
No. So eventually, 6 months later, or however long it was, the guy in France had to resign to be like, well, I haven't been working for you guys for
6 months.
6 months.
That's a mad story.
Yeah. So he had to resign and be like, I would like to resign, but not the manager, the boss himself never would have that difficult conversation, which is, you've moved to Paris. You now can't work for us
you
anymore.
clearly aren't here.
Yeah.
All the time.
It was unbelievable.
That's mad.
Yeah. So that's a fantastic example of somebody being a horrendous manager that just actively avoid those difficult conversations.
It is human nature to want to avoid them. I've had a couple of difficult conversations over the years.
Oh no, I'm not saying anybody enjoys having them.
No.
But if you want to be good at being a manager, you have to. I think it's like you were saying, but you have to just sort of own those difficult decisions. But look, I have to do this. It's my team. I can't turf this off to somebody else or HR or somebody to,
I think for me, it's like I'll feel that I'm shying away from a thing because I don't want to do it because it's a natural thing to not want to do it. And then I'll try and catch that and be like, I just need to do this because...
Yeah. And sometimes it's just like ripping a Band-Aid off, right? You just got to do it.
A lot of them are.
And the longer you think about it, the worse it's going to be. And you just have to have that difficult conversation.
Yeah, it can be very... And I think as well, sometimes as the manager, these things are much harder. They can actually be harder than they are for the person that it's happening to. Because you don't know how they're going to react as the manager. And a lot of times I've been like, they're going to like freak out, they're going to get really... And they're just like, oh, okay. In fact, that's been the most common thing is they're just kind of like, oh, all right, fine. But you are like freaking out, like, oh, this could be a really big thing for this person.
Yeah, and we've... when I was managing somebody, they weren't performing very well. Or they just felt very distracted a lot, and the code that we're writing was really bad, and I was like, what is going on here? Like, I feel like we've hired this person and they seem to be very positive, and it just seems to have gone off the rails a bit. And so we sat down with him and had this conversation, and we're like, look, what's been going on? Feel like you're not working very effectively. You're very distracted. Your mind's everywhere. And it turned out that actually he'd been having it was like an anniversary of a, family death or something.
Yeah.
And it was that sort of like, personal issue that he would never tell us. He would never just announce.
But you noticed.
But now, but then the fact that we'd noticed and asked him about it privately, me and my boss, and he'd been honest with us, it was like, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Can deal with that.
Now we can try and work around these issues that you're having at this, however long it was, this period that, he felt that he couldn't really focus. And it was like, well, that's fine. We can, we're happy to deal with it because obviously we want you to stay working here. But we were thinking that you just didn't like working here anymore. So we were thinking about having to like make you redundant and stuff.
I think being approachable as a boss is pretty good as well for those sorts of reasons because, people have like where work performance is affected for all sorts of different reasons. Like anniversaries of things happening is like one that I think is quite common. Just different things like, health issues, other things, family issues at home.
Yeah.
And it's if the boss is approachable and you don't think they're going to judge you and they'll just be like, they're a decent human being and they'll be like, yeah, okay, I understand. That is a massive win for the person. Because these things, as a boss, if someone comes to you and says, like my mum or dad's sick and I need to, I'm having a really tough time caring for them or whatever, you'd be like, oh, okay, like, sorry to hear that,
Get that
I
sorted out.
understand, yeah, go do what you need to do. But for that person, it's a massive deal.
Yeah.
Like, really disproportionate, like, very asymmetrical. For them, it's like everything.
Yeah.
And for you, you're like, okay, yeah, fine, just do what you need to do, because most of the time it just might mean their performance isn't going to be quite right. And it's better to know.
Yeah.
But it's
better to know, and then you can just adjust your expectations accordingly. And if depending on the size of the organisation, you might be like, look, you're going to have to you should take this time away as, whatever, as leave rather than coming in, because coming in doesn't actually make any sense. Those sort of things that you can have those discussions about how to make that person's life easier rather than them just sitting there struggling and then the manager being equally frustrated. Frustrations both sides.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's just talk it out.
What do you think about managers that are like, I don't know how to word it, but like some managers are much more, I would say old-fashioned is the word I would use, but they're very conscious about when their staff are there. If it's on site, they're like,
as in like being
Dave's 10 minutes late every day, or like those kind of things. What do you think about?
Yeah, this is tough. So I've been on both sides of the fence, and I feel that my opinion differs depending on which side of the fence I'm on.
Beautifully consistent. That's great.
But I think, so I would say having absolutely accurate start and end times of the day is obviously ridiculous and horrendously outdated. What I do appreciate as having managed people is them being in the office, assuming it's a role where you're expecting them to be in the office most of the time.
Yeah.
There's few things I would expect, and if I was doing it again as a manager, I would sort of set these as rules. I would say, I don't mind what time you come in and what time you go home, but you need to be in for some minimum number of core hours that I'm going to be there as the manager.
Yeah.
So you can't, if you come in at 6 a.m. because you wake up really early, that's fine, but everybody else is going to be in from 9 to 5. So you need to be in, say, minimum 11 till 3, whatever the hours are, right? If you're coming in, at least make sure your hours overlap with those hours.
Yeah. Because
a lot of the time in a team, you need to talk to people. And if you're having a role where everyone's in the office, you being in is a big deal.
Overlap is important, yeah.
So that's fine. And then I'm more than happy to allow people to work from home. Mm-hmm. The only thing I'd say is you need to give me more than... If you're going to work from home tomorrow, you need to let me know the day before. Preferably before you go home. Because basically that just stops people in the morning being like, I can't be arsed, I'm going to stay at home.
Yes, they have to plan it.
You have to plan it. So as long as it's planned, I have no issue with it, because it means that you're either consciously making an effort to work from home because you don't want to do anything, or more likely you actually have something you genuinely just need to be at home for, even if it's just a delivery. Particularly if you're in a house, you don't have a concierge.
Yeah.
You need there's something big turning up. For 10 minutes of the day or half an hour of the day, you might be unavailable, but the rest of the day you're going to be logged in. I'm happy with that. Those are my sort of rules that I've come up with over time.
The core hours thing. So I was thinking, when I asked you the question, I get annoyed when I work for people or I know people that work for people and they're sticklers about the time, especially with...
Oh, I don't like it either.
I think the core hours thing, I think if I ran a company on site, I think I would have core hours. I think maybe I'd have them... Perhaps everybody needs to be there by 10.
Yeah, something like that. I was being...
but 10 till 4. If people want to leave at 4... I think in the past I had a number of hours that people had to work. So you need to work 8 hours and you need to overlap those core hours. But I do think that is slightly inconsistent with the idea which I hold for myself, which is that it's about output and how much good work someone does for you. Yeah. It's not about when it gets done or how or the fact that they sit in front of a computer for 8 hours is a little bit irrelevant if all the work gets done. Because the thing that happens then is, just human beings are quite incentive based. What's your incentive to do all your work if you still have to sit in front of the computer at work? You can get it all done in 3 hours in the morning. You're going to sit there for 5 hours, and your boss, you can't do whatever you want. You can't just sit there playing solitaire, which is obviously how I'd spend my time if I'd finished all my work, because your boss would be like, what are you doing? Yeah. And then they'd be like, well, I'll give you more work. So the incentive for finishing all your work quickly is to get given more work, which is kind of mad. So I kind of think it should just be, but also quantifying a sensible amount of work to give someone.
I think the problem you have there though is that in most places the list of work is never ending. So then it's a question of. Then for me, it's a question of that person's initiative.
Yeah.
So if you you rush through all your stuff, there's always more to be done. That person should be taking the time to be like, oh, there's other stuff I can be doing, which helps the team. And that comes back to the team culture, right? But
the problem I have a little bit is when I work as a developer, I almost have like a certain amount of stuff that I can get done. But I've noticed that I can get it done in 8 hours or I can get it done in like 4. But that doesn't mean that I can do that much work twice.
Yes.
4 hours in a day.
Yeah.
There's almost like, there's some sort of like natural capacity, which is not necessary. It is linked to time, but it's a little bit loose. It's like, I'm going to like get in, I'm really focused. I'm like, I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. I get there, I start smashing it into the keyboard and it's done.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I want to finish and go and do this other thing. But I couldn't then be like, right, reset, it's 12 o'clock. Let's do the same thing again. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think that makes it that difficult. Having those fixed hours, that's what makes that so hard, right? Is that and it works, actually, I was going to say it works against the company as well, right? So if you're saying you have to work 9 to 5 every day, on a quiet day, people get annoyed because at 3 they've finished and they can't go home.
Yeah.
But similarly, where that then bites the company in the arse is that if there's some sort of critical production issue at 4 p.m,
just go home.
Everyone at 5 is like, well, I'm going home.
Yeah.
Because what's the incentive to stay later? Because you're never going to make that back.
Yeah.
So you could be like, and that's what's the flexibility is good, right? If something bad is happening in an evening, people will be like, you know what, I don't mind staying till 7 today because, on Friday it'll be quiet, nothing's going on, we'll just all leave at 3 or something. You know what I mean? There's that, it's give and take. You allow people to not be there certain hours because sometimes you might need them to be there hours that they wouldn't normally be there.
Yeah. I've had some, when I came into asking that question, I was thinking, don't be too much of a stickler. But then I did that when we were working remotely, when I started my company. We had a few people working for us, some of whom didn't stay. And some people were just kind of taking the piss a bit.
Yeah.
So one guy said to a guy, I hadn't seen him come online. At 11, I sent him a message being like, oh, are you working today? And he went, oh, yeah, my friends come over today, so I'm just not working.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that's...
okay, well, I'm paying you to work, so
you need to work.
You probably just need to like do it. But
that's the problem. That's always the problem with working from home is it's a nice benefit for people who genuinely need to be at home but will also work. But it's very, very easy for people to not do anything all day. Mm-hmm. Really easy, and that's, I don't know how you fix that problem.
It's hard
because a potential way to do it is that you earn the right to work from home. Mm-hmm. So you could say you get a new person joining, it's like that you can't work from home for 6 months. Or until, we're confident that we trust you enough that you'll get stuff done when you're from home. I think giving people working from home straight away and being really flexible about it is risky because I think it allows people to take advantage of it.
Working from home is a difficult, complex topic, but I think...
Well, no, I think it's separate though from, if it's an in-person job that allows working from home, that's where the risk is. I think if you're taking a job where you're expected to entirely work from home, I don't know if it's the same problem. I don't know.
I've definitely had different phases of my career. When I had my first job, I worked from home occasionally in like a big corporate job which was on site. And basically any time I worked from home, it was surprising if I really got anything done. Mm. But since then, when I run my own company or I'm working on like my own thing, working from home is completely fine because the motivation is just there. You want to get the thing done. It doesn't really matter where you are. Mm. So then that's fine. And then there's kind of contracting. If it's entirely remote, I think you're right. You kind of start thinking, you might have a bad day where you don't get much done, but then you're like, if I don't get anything done this week, it's going to look...
Yeah.
I think if you're measuring employees by their output, the thing is when you're in an office, there's a strong temptation for management to not measure employees by their output. They measure them by the fact that they're there. Attendance. Yeah. Attendance becomes like that person attends. And you see it more because Mrs. Rich is a trader, it's a bit more old school. They have to be in by 7:30.
Yeah.
And her one of her bosses she's had in the past has like, he was just an absolute stickler for that. But 7:35 was like not good enough.
Yeah.
7:30, that's when they start. And I think my feeling, and this is not really a very good answer on this whole what rules should you have and how fluid you should be. I think you need some rules just to make people understand that there are rules.
Yeah.
Even if those rules are a little bit arbitrary. Because when I had no rules, people
will just take advantage.
Yeah, and maybe it was because in my case, those people were very junior and hadn't really had proper jobs before. And so they just didn't understand the set of rules that probably most people listening just know. Like if you have a job, you turn up. Like those kind of things. Yeah. Just because you're working remotely doesn't mean that you can just not do it on like a bit of a whim. So it's kind of... Yeah, it is. I've had a few things like that where it's a few like things that really surprised me, and then I was like, right. So then we wrote the rules down, and after that, we didn't really have any problems.
So what were the rules that you wrote down? What were those rules then?
A core set of hours with a start, and then which were a bit broader than yours, but similar, like 10 till 4 or something.
Yeah. I thought mine were a bit lax, but
they had to do 8 hours. But I never really would enforce that.
It's very hard, I guess, to enforce it.
Well, yeah, working remotely, you basically, if someone sets their mouse to twitch every 5 minutes and keeps their phone on them, they could work 5 hours a day and I'd have none the wiser. And if I was genuinely none the wiser, I don't care. Like, they've obviously done enough work that I'm like, this is fine.
Yeah.
It's quite easy being technical. You just measure people with pull requests. You see, well, some codes come in, it looks like they've done some good work and it's like working towards what we wanted. And the rate that I'm getting pull requests and how much code is in those pull requests or how much functionality or how tricky it is seems about right. It's quite hard for someone to mug you off with that. They can.
I guess the problem there would be that somebody could be genuinely stuck on quite a difficult problem.
Yes.
And you would say, well, you haven't committed anything for 2 days, but you're like, look, I've been really struggling.
Yeah, but you would expect if they were really struggling that they'd probably message you and be like, I'm looking at this.
No, I agree.
So they could like fake you out by like coming up with a fake problem, sitting on it for like 5 hours, then messaging you and saying, I'm stuck with this problem, which they're not really stuck on. But like most people, if given that or the choice of just like doing some work, most people will probably just do the work because it's like more rewarding anyway. They're not gonna.
Yeah, I think it's the people that as a manager, people that are working for you that don't ask for help are people that that's a problem. That's a problem behavior, right? As a somebody you're managing, you want people to ask for help as soon as they've got problems.
I want them to ask. Mine's more nuanced than that. I want them to ask. I don't want them to ask for help immediately. My standard rule of thumb for very junior developers is try it for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then if you've been struggling for more than 4, at 4 you need to ask. The reality is different because it depends whether they can figure it out on their own. Because if they can figure it out on their own, there's a really big benefit to that. Because they're basically learning how to problem solve, and they're more likely to be able to solve future problems.
Yeah.
And that's like an important skill set. But on the other hand, and it also varies by person. You've got the askers who
hit that 2 hour line and they're like, hello.
Or even the askers, if you don't give them rules like that, will ask after like 5 minutes.
Yeah, but because those are the people that they don't necessarily want to think for themselves, right? They go, I can't do it, so immediately ask. Whereas actually they can do it if they put their mind to it. One
of my brothers who I trained, he is the ultimate non-asker, pretty much.
As in he would just not ask ever.
He would not ask. He would normally get there most of the time, but you would have to catch up with him and be like, because sometimes people, especially when they're junior, they can get stuck on things that they could never get unstuck on, and it's very hard for them to distinguish the difference between a thing that they're one insight away from getting and something where they're lacking a core understanding of a thing and they're just buggered and they're never going to get it. So it's like, and it's very hard because they're so deep in it and they don't know what they don't know that it's different as you get more experience. Like you and I will see a problem and you will know the problems that are the peaches that you're just like, I need help.
Yeah.
Like, like I've been working with the Stripe APIs recently, and I have emailed their support a few times because I'm like, I look at it for 5 minutes. I'm like, I've used these APIs quite a lot. I generally feel I know what I'm doing as a developer, and I am none the wiser. I'm like 5 minutes in, but I messaged them also because their time is free for me and I don't pay for it. So
well, you pay for it when you start using it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but it's like there's no cost for me. Like it's not like I'm screwing over my teammate by taking up their time. So it's kind of like my threshold for asking is pretty low because I'm like, well, Jeff is going to email me back. And
yeah, that's true.
Whatever. So you kind of got to think of the flip side. But
that's a good point. I think yeah, if you're too open to answering questions, you get into that dangerous game of everybody asking you everything all
and
the
then,
time.
like you said, they're being lazy.
Yeah.
What you want is, I would say, you want the struggle, but you want the right amount of struggle. Just like, because good learning comes through the right amount of struggle.
Yeah.
Basic. You don't really learn much if everything's easy, but you don't learn much if you're playing on a setting which is so hard you just can't do anything. So
and you don't learn if somebody just tells you the answer.
No. So you kind of learn in a knowledge-based way, but you don't learn how to solve a similar but different problem that crops up in the future. And programming is basically being able to solve any problem that you see because you know how to solve problems at a very general level.
Yeah.
And so, good managers will probably let people struggle that much and maybe detect if they're not asking and try and set boundaries and be like, look, 4 hours is a good rule of thumb. 4 hours is a long time to sit and look at something.
But what's really interesting about what you said on the struggling and also on the rules of work or rules of being in work or time is that you actually spent the time to write them down and make them very clear. Because in most places that you work, that stuff is just inferred.
Yeah.
You work out, because you work there for a month and you go, people seem to work from home every now and again.
Or it's in the contracts, but it's ridiculous. That's the other one.
I see.
They'll be like, you must wear, and then there's like all this, but that's not really the truth. It's like a rent agreement when you're renting a house, and they're like, you may not have a religious gathering in your living room or a political gathering. You're like, you don't know what I'm doing in my house. Like, go away. Like, come on. But like, they have the same sorts of things where they're like, you cannot do this.
I guess. It's related to that, but like you're saying, is like what the attire is in the
in the
company.
It's got worse since we started because.
How do you mean?
So like attire used to be simple because I think
Business casual.
Because it was more just business. So like especially in investment banks, it's easy.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's more like business casual or casual. So going to job interviews.
Oh, I see.
And things like that. You're like,
what do I wear?
If I go to a job interview, I have to message whoever. I need to be like, I normally say, what do you wear? Which, comes across a little bit.
I'm not wearing anything.
What are you wearing? Okay. But like, and then you want to go like one level up from that. But it is difficult.
So if I was interviewing now, I would never wear a tie anymore. But I think when I was starting out, I definitely wore a tie to every interview. It's that sort of thing. Everything's getting a little more casual.
My first job, pretty corporate, big bank, the engineers, but not everybody in the whole business, but the engineers now wear smart casual.
Yeah.
Which is a really big change. I think it's a positive change because, I've worn...
What you wear doesn't affect the output of what you produce.
I think it does. A
Really?
bit. Yeah, it affects my mindset. I wouldn't take a job where I had to wear a shirt anymore because they're uncomfortable. It's my first.
You need to buy more expensive shirts.
I went to you got that satin silk just grazing you. It's just
hugging myself.
I went to a wedding recently and I was sat in my suit and I just thought, absolutely not. This is I think I walked downstairs having got dressed and just went, nope. And as soon as the wedding was done, I was like, I'm just taking all of this off. This is horrendous. I don't know. I do feel like
but I think there's the only good thing about something like business casual is that it's that sort of uniform effect, like they talk about in schools and stuff, where everybody wearing a similar thing has some advantages.
Yeah.
But similarly, I would say, like when I was at the startup, we just wore whatever we want. Now I decided to be a bit smarter, but that's maybe because I just felt. Again, I guess it's the manager setting a standard.
T-shirt and a tie as well.
Yeah, t-shirt and a tie.
My coding tie.
It's like tie on, work tie. Just as I sit down on the desk. But I feel like as a senior person and as a manager, you can set that a little bit. So you're like, if I was turning up in a suit for that startup, I guess the other guys would be like, have I got to wear a suit?
What a great experiment.
I don't know if maybe that wouldn't have worked. But I was like,
I think
and like when it was summer, I wore shorts because that's the fact that you can't
legs to breathe. I mean,
but that's the funny thing. Like if you have people that are wearing smart clothes, like business casual in the UK, most of the year that's fine. But if you're anywhere like Singapore or warm countries like that, you've got guys wearing suits in 35-degree heat.
I don't know how people do. It's mad when I go to places like that and I see them. I'm like, what are you doing?
One of the strong memories I have the first time I went to Singapore was it was bright sun, red hot.
It's always it's quite humid
and very
there.
humid.
Yeah.
So a lot of the shops are underground, and we were walking outside, and there was a guy in the shade of one door, and then he ran through the sun to get to the next place. It was like the opposite of what you'd expect in the UK. Normally you'd do that because it was raining. He was doing it to stay out of the sun. And it's like, you've got to be... I mean, it's a very old school... it's similar to the hours. It's an old school thing to be like, everyone needs to be smart, and everyone needs to be... There's nothing wrong with being presentable, but you can be presentable casually as well. As you can be like, look, no flip-flops. That's probably the only rule I'd probably set.
What's the 3 Bs? Bums, bellies, and something else. Breasts? Don't know. Yeah.
So, like, don't show any.
Don't show those, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was a school rule, maybe, for us. I kind of think that the whole, like, uniform at work thing, or, like, a quite strict dress code is, for me, it's a bit of a negative. It's kind of trying to make people comply, and I don't know. I don't think it's good in like a very creative environment. And a lot of companies that are very creative
would never have a
don't
dress
have
code.
that.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it kind of like, but also the pro is it probably keeps people in line and probably means that they're going to behave in a more formal way, which might be better. Yeah, or worse, depending on what you're doing.
I wonder, like, if you're in like an investment bank and it's smart casual, I wonder like how obvious. I don't know about this. As a kid, it's easier if you're thinking about school, but like, what would be like the senior guys? Are they wearing like £200 t-shirts? And it's like obvious that those guys are wealthy.
Yeah.
And versus, because I mean that's what
happens in Silicon Valley though. Like no one wears a suit. Like they might wear a jacket and a t-shirt, but then they start like it becomes like trainers sneakers. So like I perhaps this is showing too much, but I read an article. I've seen it actually. I've read the same article twice, which I think tells you a lot about me. I was reading what sneakers the CEOs of different Silicon Valley companies have.
Right, because there's people keep an eye on that.
So like Sundar from Google, like he was wearing like a particular type of like limited edition Converse, and it's like, and like Tim Cook was wearing like Nike Flyknits or whatever that cost like 200 quid. And yeah, you're totally right. Like they're basically ramping it up.
Yeah,
but like. They're casual, but they're clearly not casual because they've probably got a stylist.
And what they're wearing is like worth £1,000.
Yeah.
Well, that's what, and then a uniform to some degree. Although you obviously can still spend a lot, everybody sort of looks the same. Obviously, a good suit does look better than a bad suit. But I don't know. It was just it's one thing that I've thought about, and I would never enforce a strict dress code. I would just say people need to be. I would use the word presentable.
Yeah.
I.e. You're not coming in like pajamas.
Yeah.
And or if somebody turns up and says this is the company that we're going to buy some software for, I wouldn't be hiding you under the desk.
We used to have when I worked at the hedge fund, we used to have investors come in, and they used to be like, tomorrow, like we would always wear like
they'd be like, tomorrow you need to take it up a notch.
Yeah, it wouldn't be clothes. It would be cleanliness of desks. They'd be like, get rid of all the clutter. Basically make it look like you're doing some work and that everything's good. But they
turn on the screens that like beep boop and have like the Matrix coming out.
We'll turn off the cricket and we'll put Bloomberg back on. The investors like that.
Because as an investor, you come and go, oh, Bloomberg's on the telly. Yes.
We take off like the database diagram and put on some like complicated maths on the whiteboard. So those sorts of things.
Just copy and paste the database diagram 7 times. You're like, oh, that looks really complicated.
That looks so good. But yeah, no, it is a strange kind of thing. It's kind of weird just telling people what they can and can't wear. Thinking about it, it's straight, but we're just so used to it. It's just culture.
But and then how that affects the culture, I guess. Sorry, I think that has been a bit of a tangent, more about sort of team. But it's I think it's interesting. It would be interesting to see somewhere like you were saying, your investment bank, where it would be interesting to see how people coped with the change. Because obviously, generally, you work in company X might be very smart, company Y might be really casual. But there, in that example, you'll have people that were historically very smart, and then the next day they're like, yeah, from Monday, you can be smart cash.
That's where
do people just panic? What do people do?
I wasn't
don't
there
own
when
enough
that.
T-shirts.
So some of my friends still wear smart clothes. I met up with them last week or the week before, and they're still wearing smart clothes. But it's a really strange transition.
That sort of transition must be
Because when I worked there, everybody wore smart clothes all the time, with basically very few exceptions. And then all of a sudden, a whole division, which is like I think over 1,000 people in London, they were like,
don't
worry, like that. And it's still like smart casual. They're still pretty smart.
Yeah. But not shirt and suit, right?
Yeah, some of them will be wearing like more casual shirts.
Yeah.
Or like, it's kind of like dress down Friday.
Yeah,
attire.
but all the time. Yeah, I think for me, like, shirt with jeans and a casual shirt, that for me is like, I'm happy with that. If they were like, if somebody enforced that, I'd be like, that's fine.
That's a Jas look though.
Well, I've been rocking it for the last 2 years. I was the one that turned it.
You're quite smart as a person, actually.
Thank you very much.
I think you are. You're the kind of person. If I met up with you, like to go for dinner with some friends, I wouldn't be surprised if you looked quite presentable, like ready to go to that kind of.
Oh,
job.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Whereas you can count the days in a year on one hand of how many days I look presentable. Last year I got married, reasonably presentable. One. That was like, yeah. And then there were maybe like 3 or 4 others. But I've become.
Yeah. But I think as well, like, it just depends on how much, whether those, again, it comes down to whether those clothes are comfortable or not, right? Like, we're different sizes, so shirts might just fit me better.
Yeah.
Like, let them be more comfortable.
Yeah, my muscles really make it very.
You're just sort of hulking out those bad boys again.
I used to work with a guy that I was telling someone this the other day, but basically he's quite a big guy, quite stocky, and he used to work out a lot in the gym. And he would rip a shirt in the days when my first big company, he would rip a shirt at least once every 2 weeks.
Once every 2 weeks? No,
all the time. He'd turn around and be like, "Oh, Dick," and you just hear it go, and it would always go like under the armpit. But he just owned it. He was like, "Yeah, I'm a big guy." He was an awkward shape.
I thought you were going to say once every like 2 months.
he was on that. He wasn't. The thing is, he wasn't fat. He was just muscly.
Yeah.
And so like he could literally flex his shirt to rip more or less. It was crazy. So
I can't quite do that.
No, I've ripped very few shirts in my time.
I ripped like 1 or 2. But that's through like the elbow generally, or
the elbow.
Yeah, just these really pointy elbows.
Your elbow's got a lot of wear and tear on it.
Yeah, it does.
In general.
Jesus.
We'll put a picture of that in the show notes.
All right, I think.
Yeah.
Is there anything? I think we've covered everything that else you put.
Yeah.
This was a great note taking exercise.
Yeah, I did it on my way here. There's only one more thing.
Oh yeah.
Which is which I think is actually maybe the route we've slightly gone down, which is. Perhaps it's okay not to manage and to stay a bit more technical.
Yes, definitely.
I think that is, or maybe the thing I said before, where you just become more autonomous and you just become like your own manager and you're sort of managing yourself a bit more. It's kind of like really senior dev. I think that's maybe okay. But if it's just a really strange career progression to be like, I'm really into tech stuff, so I learned to program, or I went to university to do it, or I did a boot camp. And then I'm coding and I really like that and I'm going to get career progression. And then one day someone's like, would you rather just create Jira tickets and be on the phone? And you're like, not really. No. So I think it's kind of, and some people do because that's where the money is or the career progression is. But I think
it's weird to think that that's even a career. That doesn't make sense as a career progression, right? But like for anyone else, if you were progressing in a career as a doctor, you don't get
They do a bit.
Well, no, but you don't get halfway through and they're like, would you like to do administration?
Yeah.
It's like, no, that doesn't really... Because I would say a lot of what a good manager is, they're doing a lot of admin-y stuff that the developers don't want to do. And so I think there are definitely some people that would be good managers that don't want to do it, but you could see it perhaps that you'd be like, look, they'd be really good actually at just keeping, and that's when you push those people into that sort of role. But I have seen people that are clearly managers that just regret being a manager. They just took it for the pay grade or whatever.
I think if you do it for a few years as well, you can lose your mojo and your confidence a little bit, and going backwards becomes hard. Yeah, I heard that my first boss has gone back, and I was quite happy to hear that he's doing a bit more dev. Yeah, but I do. Yeah, it is a difficult thing. I think the other problem with it is that it's very hard to stay to do management to a percentage which is less than 100. It always tends to 100. You're like, oh, I'll do 50-50 management software development. there's like a 90% chance that you end up doing like 100% management. It's just
because there's always more stuff to deal with that
Yeah.
you can take off your developers,
it
right?
naturally grows, and it really affects your ability to develop, so that you just can't really get anything done. Then at some point you're just going to sack it in, because you're like, if you do both, a good tip that I've heard is to not put yourself on the critical path of a project. So don't give if you're the manager, you're also doing a bit of dev, don't give yourself any of the critical tasks, because you'll probably end up stuck on a conference call.
Yeah.
And then you have a choice of, we really need that code done, so I'm going to have to do it after work. Because I think what you see in a lot of managers when they switch is they end up just working a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Because the parts of your brain that do management and development means that if you said to someone you need to do 14 hours of management today or 14 hours of development, it's not possible. But you can probably do 7 of each, because it's sort of different.
Yeah, and then you just get exhausted. Then.
Yeah, and you get fatigued over time, and that's a disaster. So I think, giving yourself a little thing to do, or maybe just doing the technical things to keep, like, I'm going to, make the build better or make our deployment better, and do sort of discretionary things that perhaps the rest of the team, that there would never be budget from, and just say, I'm not really developing.
But they would appreciate it.
Yeah, but it will like speed the team up. Maybe those are good things to pick off.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think that is I think in big organisations, the pressure can be there to, like you say, keep progressing, and you're like, it's inevitable that I'm going to become a manager. And I think people that are developers should feel like they can say, no, I want to stay technical, and just allow the organisation to work that out. I think that should, it's not for everybody, and it shouldn't be pushed on everybody just because you've been a very good developer. Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense, no. Cool.
All right, I think we're done. That's hopefully our shortest episode, because we didn't have any follow up, basically.
No follow up.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.